Hello and welcome to the population unit. All right, so just real quick recap. Um, I just had you do a little mini research project where you created a timeline of some major historical event somewhere in the world that had an ancient civilization. And now we're worried about the now. So, over the next few days, you're going to be looking at this textbook, whether we're actually in class or online, depending on the weather. And you'll be reading sections 2.1 to 2.4 and answering some questions in a quiz. It's more of like a virtual worksheet, just so you can get to know these concepts a little bit better. So the purpose of this video is I'm just going to read this to you and just to help you answer some questions along the way. So this is section 2.1. It's all about population concentrations. And I like this because it kind of sets the stage for where essentially populations of people are, and more importantly, things that impact population. So let's get into it. Population concentrations. Two-thirds of the world's inhabitants are clustered in 4 regions. Regions with harsh environments have relatively low populations. Human beings are not distributed uniformly or the same across Earth's surface. World maps depict this distribution in several ways. Number one, population concentrations. Two-thirds of the world's inhabitants live in 4 regions. 4 regions: East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe. The 4 population concentrations occupy generally low-lying areas with temperature, climate, and soil suitable for agriculture. Physical environments that are too dry, too cold, too wet, or too mountainous tend to have fewer inhabitants. If you've ever heard the story Goldilocks, the population is very much related to it. Population concentrations are not in a place that's literally too hot, not too cold. We want it to be just right. Population cartogram. You should already know what this is, but a population cartogram depicts the size of countries according to population rather than land area, as is the case with most maps. No need to talk about that. You've already done that. Population clusters. The world can be divided into 7 regions, each containing approximately 1 billion people. The small size of the Asia region shows the large number of the world's inhabitants living there. Okay. These little little tiny insets of text are also extremely important. It talks about where populations are not on this page, and on the next page, it'll show you and talk about where people are. So real quick, where human beings do not like to live on a large scale. I'm going right here, 2.1 to 2.2. This section right here, sparsely populated regions, cold lands, wetlands, and highlands. All right, sparsely populated regions. Humans do not live in large numbers in certain physical environments. Cold lands. Much of the land near the North and South poles is perpetually covered with ice, where the ground is permanently frozen. The polar regions are unsuitable for planting crops, and few animals can survive the extreme cold. Wetlands. Lands that receive very high levels of precipitation, located primarily near the equator, may also be inhospitable for human occupation. The combination of rain and heat rapidly depletes nutrients from the soil and thus hinders agriculture. Highlands. The highest mountains in the world are steep, snow-covered, and sparsely settled. However, some high-altitude plateaus and mountain regions are more densely populated, especially at low latitudes, essentially near the equator, where agriculture is possible at high elevations. So that was 2.1, the first page there, and go to 2.1, page 2. And this will talk about where human beings are mostly at, specifically in those four regions: Europe, East Asia, Southeast Asia. But real quick, let's get to the dry lands real fast. Okay, dry lands. Areas too dry for farming cover approximately 20% of Earth's land surface. Deserts generally lack sufficient water to grow crops that could feed a larger population, although some people survive there by raising animals, such as camels, that are adapted to the climate. Dry lands contain natural resources useful to people, notably much of the world's oil reserves. So let's get to these four regions where a majority of the world's population is concentrated. All right, so if you're one of the few people that did like a history of the Roman Empire, that's a great way to start learning about why the population is concentrated there. So let's talk about Europe. Europe includes 4 countries, ranging from Monaco with 1 square kilometer and a population of 33,000 to Russia, the world's largest country in land area when its Asian part is included. In contrast to the 3 Asian concentrations, 3/4 of Europe's inhabitants live in cities and fewer than 10% are farmers. The highest population concentrations in Europe are near the major rivers and coal fields of Germany and Belgium, as well as historic capital cities such as London and Paris. So again, it's a constant running theme. Large population concentrations are going to be located near either historic civilizations, London or Paris, or near bodies of water, like rivers. East Asia. Nearly 1/4 of the world's people live in East Asia. The region bordering the Pacific Ocean includes eastern China, the islands of Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and the island of Taiwan. The People's Republic of China is the world's most populous country and 4th largest country in land area. The Chinese population is clustered near the Pacific coast and in several fertile river valleys that extend inland, though much of China's interior is sparsely inhabited mountains and deserts. More than 1/2 of the people live in rural areas where they work as farmers. In sharp contrast, more than 3/4 of all Japanese and Koreans are clustered in urban areas and work at industrial or service jobs. So again, this is why China has had such population growth potential, somewhat, because more than half of the people live in rural areas. So there's like areas to expand too. But as we'll get to China more specifically, China has had some government policies that have actually impacted population growth. Their population's going down. So let's talk about South Asia. Nearly 1/4 of the world's people live in South Asia, which includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the island of Sri Lanka. The largest concentration of people within South Asia lives along a 1,500-kilometer corridor from Lahore, Pakistan, through India and Bangladesh to the Bay of Bengal. Much of this area's population is concentrated along the plains of the Indus and Ganges rivers. So those of you that did your timeline over the Indus River Valley, and there's still a large concentration of people there. Population is also heavily concentrated near India's 2 long coastlines, the Arabian Sea to the west and the Bay of Bengal to the east. Like the Chinese, most people in South Asia are farmers living in rural areas. So if a majority of a place's population are farmers, usually that means that place has got a good, healthy supply of food, which we don't want to forget about farmers, even though a majority of us right here in this part of the world are not now. We're a rural community, but most of us are not farmers. That matters. All right, Southeast Asia. Around 600 million people live in Southeast Asia, mostly on a series of islands that lie between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Indonesia, which consists of 13,677 islands, is the world's fourth most populous country. The largest population concentration is on the island of Java, inhabited by more than 100 million people. Several islands that belong to the Philippines contain high population concentrations, and population is also clustered along several river valleys and deltas at the southeastern tip of the Asian mainland, known as Indochina. As in China and South Asia, the Southeast concentration is characterized by a high percentage of people working as farmers in rural areas. So that concludes this video for sections 2.1, population concentration. This is pretty much just a very informative chapter. There is going to be a question about where a majority of the Earth's population concentrations are. And just to be very clear, it is these four areas: East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Europe. And again, the last part of the book that I just read to you is going to give you some insight as to why. So that concludes 2.1. Next video is going to be 2.2, population density. See ya.